Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I hope you've had an amazing week, and I hope you're ready for another, what I think is an amazing show, mainly because of the guest, obviously not really because of me. This week, my guest is the host of a show that I was on just a couple of months ago, When Life Gives You Lemons, EMMA LEVY. She is an amazing human being. Early in her life, she decided and outright had focus, drive, passion, and energy to go and get it, to be a physio in top level sport. Just a few years ago, she was struck down by the news that no one really wants to hear. She was diagnosed with cancer. In this show, she talks to us about the challenges she went through, how she got out the other side. She talks to us about mindset. And she gives us an incredible amount of what I would actually call natural energy and inspiration. Welcome to this week's show announcements. No, I'm not in Athens. We're not running anywhere. We are back, and Rob Jones completed that incredible 245 kilometers from Athens to Sparta. It was pretty unreal for both of us, actually, and also for Jeff, who was there. We actually recorded a podcast on it on the way back when we were driving back from Sparta to Athens, and we'll release that in a few weeks. But congratulations to Rob. That's definitely an announcement. I'm here in Dubai, and in Dubai, Hell Week is going on here at the gym in our mainline class. We run this every 6 to 8 months, sometimes a little bit longer. It's the ultimate test. It's 5 days of brutal workouts. If you haven't got involved in it this time, chat to the people that have. It's pretty awesome, and wait for it to come around again. It will come, and it will be hard again, and you should definitely do it. Other things that are going on this weekend on the CrossFit side, it is the Precision Games, Precision Pairs, which is happening at, I believe, Dubai American Academy on Saturday. We have a bunch of teams going down. It is an all-day event, loads of fun to watch. It's probably a little bit late if you're listening to the show now to get involved in that, but if you're interested in watching a CrossFit competition or a fitness competition, there's not a lot of what we'd call high-skilled movements in this, so it's fast, it's furious, it's a lot of fun, and it'd be great if we could get down and support some of the teams that are there. On the flip side of the coin, it is the Roy Nasser Memorial Triathlon this weekend at Deira Islands for the first time. Roy was a dear friend of mine and of the endurance community here in Dubai, and he was tragically taken from us 10 years ago, literally a few weeks ago. It's gone incredibly fast, but that triathlon lives on, and it is happening this Saturday, Deira Islands, Saturday morning, 6:30 or 6 a.m. kickoff. So if you're looking for two things to watch this weekend, Precision Games and also the Roy Nasser Memorial Triathlon. Keeping it endurance. If you are looking for an endurance team community, we do have not just individual coaching, but a community package, which recently has prepared a very fine performance from one of our members on that slate. She did an amazing job down in Salalah, the 70.3 there, where she was on the podium. So it's a pretty decent program, and it gets you part of a great community. That is it for this week's announcements. Let's hop over to this week's show. This is episode number 844 of the InnerFight podcast. Cancer with EMMA LEVY. No matter where you are in the world, thanks for tuning in. Let's jump into today's show. Welcome to today's show, and welcome. This is the reverse match or the return match. EMMA Life Gives You Lemons podcast. Who, if those people that do follow me on social media know I was on your show, you're very kind to have me on your show, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this chat.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you interview someone that you've been interviewed by. I don't know. We were saying before, like, I don't have many notes. You'll know how to answer. We had a good chat before. Everything will be fine.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting you to get your own back. So I did re-listen to our chat, and I was thinking, what did I ask him that was difficult? Because he's going to ask the same thing back. But I'm pleased that you haven't done the same research.
I've actually done a little bit of research. I have a few stats on. It's interesting. One of my questions for like my emergency questions, but I'm going to start with it.
Okay.
Physio for the British diving team what sort of, and this is like nothing to do with our main topic today, but what sort of injuries do you deal with?
Yeah, cool. So just to, I suppose, preface that as well as being a podcaster and being the host of When Life Gives You Lemons, I'm also a physiotherapist, having worked in elite sport for now 10 years plus. So I now work with the British diving team, and we're based out in London, in Stratford. And yeah, we see a whole load of injuries. And I must say, what I find interesting about the divers is they can just be injured all over the place. So literally head. So if they miss their hands and they land on their head, they get concussion. So that can be pretty nasty. We then come down to neck. We get lots of neck problems, thoracic spine, lumbar spine, shoulders, triceps, hand injuries, hips, knees. Seriously, I'm literally in my head, I'm going through all the divers, and there's not one thing that they don't injure. Really? Yeah, I think our biggest burden is knees and lumbar spine, probably, if we had to and shoulders, actually.
How do they hurt their knees?
Because of the jumping. So especially the springboard guys. So if you watch a springboard diver, they're doing really big jumps to try, and they've got to get as high as possible to be able to achieve the skills in the air before they hit the water. So they need some serious muscle strength around the hips and the knees to get that high. So yeah, lots of tendon injuries around the knees, actually.
It's that was one of my more random questions for later, but I've used that one up. I want to follow on a little bit on that. How do you get to be, I'm always interested to see how people get to the jobs that they're in, because that, like, physio for the British diving team doesn't seem like a job I'd find advertised at my local newsagent, right? So how do you get a job like that?
Yeah, it's very true. So I was really lucky. I knew from age kind of 14, 15, I wanted to be a physio with elite athletes. Right. So I, as a youngster, was a tennis player, fairly high standard, not like, I got to county standard, which nice. Is okay. Yeah. And I injured my shoulder. And so I ended up seeing a physio, and I was like, right, that's the job I want. And I wanted to get into elite sport. You then, because I've always loved sport, you then start, you go to university, and in the UK, and this is like, 20 years ago now, and you're told, I remember being told very clearly at my university interviews, don't tell them you want to work in sport. So I was like, oh, all right, I just want to get in. So you go to the interviews, and you just don't tell them that you want to work in sport. I think it's because it was funded by the NHS, so National Health System. So they want you to work in that system. So I ended up going to university, and then you do what's called your rotations. So you learn a little bit about everything as a junior physio. And I must be honest, the whole way through, all I wanted was to work in sport. So I met loads of physios who would diverge down different routes, but that wasn't me. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so from the very beginning, I got a job at a local football club, paid like literally £5. And I would go into the changing rooms, and you'd have these like kind of half-naked men teasing me, and I was only like 19, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I was sitting on this muddy pitch in the rain, and I honestly, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that it'd be good on my CV. So I did it, and then from there, I just, alongside my NHS job, I just would apply for anything weird and wonderful that I could along the way. So anything, started off on kind of like the pitch side physio stuff. And then I think I worked on the London Marathon, on the route, which was a volunteer job a few years. And, all this little stuff, but I was just building up the CV until I could apply for a national governing body, like UK sport job, basically. And then my first job, even more random than the divers, I was working with the British canoe team. So the canoe slalom team, who are actually an amazing team to work with because they've won loads of Olympic medals. So that was my first proper job in Olympic sport. And then once you're in the Olympic sports system, it's quite easy to kind of move around the jobs, to be honest.
I guess it's like I hope no one from it's listening, but it's probably like an old boys club in a way. And once you're in, and you sort of, or an old club. We shouldn't make it this specific these days, should we? But it's one thing that strikes me there from listening to that, and also from seeing different things that you've done, and one of the big topics we're going to come on to, you have an insane amount of, I don't know, is it focus or determination in equal parts, or one in another part than the other? Where does that come from? Do you know you have that? Do you know that you give that off?
Yeah, I don't think anyone has ever said that they've witnessed it in me specifically, but I think I know within that I am a really determined person. Recently it's become quite trendy, the word manifesting. Right. It's kind of like a trendy word. And I remember when people started talking about it fairly recently, like this year, and I was like, what does manifesting actually mean? And then someone explained what it meant. And I remember thinking, I've always done that. From very young age, from when I wanted to be a physio, work in elite sport, I would kind of picture myself working as a physio in elite sports. And that was from a very, very young age. And I was always very determined to get there. And yeah, it's a really interesting question. Where does it come from? Is it genetic? Is it nature? Is it nurture? I think it was probably a bit of both, to be honest. But I've always just had a bit of innate confidence in myself. I remember having a debate at school with a teacher who called me arrogant. And I went back with, well, actually, I'm confident. And I think that's a little bit different to arrogant. But maybe that was quite an arrogant answer in reflection.
But is it all, what is that line of confidence into arrogance? It's like, I can do this. Well, you're arrogant. No, I just know I can do it. And maybe that's okay. And you're a school teacher and you don't have the right to tell me if I'm one or the other. I was quite like you, mate. I was the same. I was probably called arrogant more than I was called confident at that time. Yeah. Do you think you mentioned there nature versus nurture? Were your parents like that? Do you look back now and you look at certain personality traits that your mum gave you, or your dad gave you, or those around bringing you up gave you?
Yeah, I suppose I do actually. And my mum was a teacher for many years. And then she actually did a degree into psychology when I was at school. So I was about 16. So she would have been, fairly old to go back to university. But I suppose that's an example of the fact that she had the confidence in herself to pivot and to make changes, and the determination. And I probably learned quite a lot from her back then. And that was, a fairly good female role model to have growing up. She went to work every day. She wasn't at home. Well, I think she kind of like ran the home as well as going out to work. And that's what I try and do now as a mum of three. It's a juggle, but I try and give my kids as much of me as I give to everything else.
I think you've set a nice scene, and what we were talking about before we knocked it on. You've literally just come back this morning from Edinburgh. Your son, 10 years old, was performing up there. You're running a family, a household. You're taking care of. It must be wild. I think we could do a whole show on the diving and the physio side. But another, like, just because life wasn't busy enough for you, you have a podcast as well, which, as I said, I had the absolute pleasure of chatting on. And yes, you drilled me with questions, and no, I'm not going to get my own back, mate. It's, I didn't think they were too bad. Talk to us about how that came around.
Yeah, cool. So I've got a podcast called When Life Gives You Lemons. And yeah, I'm sure you would probably, you want me to go there, but that came out of my journey with cancer. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in May 2020 in the midst of the global pandemic, which was not an easy time to get diagnosed with cancer. So I had breast cancer, and, I had a pretty rough year, consisting of chemotherapy, radiotherapy, antibody therapy. Then I had double mastectomy with reconstruction. And yeah, it was tough. And within that journey, I did lots and lots of self-discovery, which I don't think is unusual. And I did start to analyze mindset quite a lot. And I was really fascinated with the concept of the fact that we all go through trauma, we all go through suffering, but some people react differently to their trauma. And depending on how we react to our trauma is what makes it traumatic. And I like to say to people, I was very much not why me, but what now? And that gave me what I thought was a very positive mindset. And through that self-discovery, I started listening to podcasts. And actually, another reason why I started listening to podcasts is because I was going through cancer in the global pandemic. I had no visitors at any of my hospital, anything. So I'd have chemotherapy alone. I was in hospital as an inpatient, fully alone. So I very much would put my headphones in, and I would kind of, I suppose you wanted the company in a way. So I would have like loads of podcasts lined up. And throughout that podcast discovery, I was educating myself, I was entertaining myself, and I got this real love of podcasts. And then I was out walking with a friend one day, and we were talking about our favorite podcasts. And I was saying, well, I'd love to start a podcast one day, but why should I be able to start a podcast? I'm a physio, I'm not a creative, I'm not a broadcaster. I suppose I'm not good enough was what I was saying. And I happened to be with a friend who was like, whoa, hang on a second. You've got a great idea here. Why can't you do a podcast? That's the beauty of podcasts. Anyone can do a podcast. And it was just kind of having someone kind of have my back and say, you can do it. And I started down this process of starting my own podcast, whereby I interview high-performing individuals who have been through adversity, but who have come back stronger. So those people, like myself, I suppose, who've been through something really quite nasty, like you with your crash, you went through something nasty, you've had some self-reflection, and you've come out the other side having learnt a lot more about yourself. And that is the story of When Life Gives You Lemons.
I have so many notes now. Now I have a lot of questions. You can see it in my face. It's terrible. I'm like, you're talking and I'm afraid. This is the way podcasting works, folks. A lot of stuff is very scripted, but a lot of stuff is not scripted at all. Whilst Emma was talking, I was actively listening and I was making a lot of notes. And now I've got lots of questions for her. You find out the middle of the global pandemic that you have breast cancer. What's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Literally. And I always say that appointment where you hear the news no one wants to hear, that you have cancer, I have probably blanked that appointment quite significantly out of my head. And the only things I remember is being told that it's fully treatable and fully curable. So I remember hearing that and thinking I'm going to be okay. And I believed I was going to be okay. I really did. And I remember seeing the color drain from my husband's face and my focus becoming on him a little bit, because I didn't want him to faint.
Was he in the room with you?
He was allowed to, and I suppose I should have probably realized at that point something was about to happen, because he was allowed in that appointment, whereby he hadn't been allowed into the hospital for anything else. But when I got the call for that appointment, they said, you're allowed to bring someone with you. But yeah, I'd forgotten that actually. I'd actually forgotten that I was given that permission to have him there. But I think that's how trauma works. You erase these memories from your brain that are just too painful. And then with the processing, which I have done loads of processing since, I'm rekindling these memories and remembering them, and then you can put them in order and start to make sense of it. But yeah, it was basically bloody scary.
You said something earlier that your sort of take was not why me, but what now, or what can I do? Was that before you were diagnosed with cancer, or was that after?
That was after.
So you kind of come up with that after, but initially you're just like, ugh.
Yeah, like, initially
life must almost stop for a second.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, initially I wanted an answer of why, not why me, because it was very much not why me and not someone else. It wasn't that. It was why me? What have I done wrong? So I was kind of convinced it was because I had drunk too much at university, or, I'd eaten too much steak, or I was vegan for a bit. And I remember someone telling me not to eat too much soy at the time. So, these things were what was coming into my head at the beginning. And it was my oncologist and my breast surgeon that sat down and said to me scientifically, it is none of those things. It's kind of a combination of genetics and bad luck. And you read, there's lots of stuff, especially social media, which cannot be very helpful when people are saying, if you drink too much, you're going to get cancer. Well, obviously we know smoking. We know some of these things do lead to cancer, but also some of these things are fairly low down the chain of leading to cancer. And actually genetics and bad luck can't do anything about that. So that I found really helpful hearing that from a scientific person, because I've got a scientific brain that relies on empirical evidence. And as soon as I was told that, I was able to think, okay, that's what's happened. Now what are we going to do with it?
Based on your personal experience of it and those things that you were saying there, the sort of the why me, I could have done this different, I could have done that different, and also combining what you've learned from others, do you think that initial reaction is okay, is quite normal?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think we can control our initial reactions really to something so like earth shattering. Here's something like that. However much you try and control your emotion, you just got to go. I think you just got to go with what you're given, and then you've got to work on it afterwards, to be honest.
It's interesting, isn't it? Excuse me, because a lot of people that you kind of speak to is like, we adopt the victim mindset straight away, which if we were to bring all of those sort of feelings together and try and label it to put it out there to the world, that would be a victim mindset. And it's exactly what I went through with my crash. I was like, why me? Why I was in that situation? All of those things. But the more I've dug into it, it's like, I think if you're not having those feelings, there's something wrong with you. Like,
yeah.
When shit really hits the fan, no matter what shit it is and what fan it's hitting, however it is, like if you're not feeling a little bit like, why did this happen to me as your initial reaction, then you're probably you probably don't have many feelings.
Yeah, I agree. It just wouldn't be a normal reaction, would it? But what I'm so interested with is the people that are able to get out of the victim mindset versus the people that aren't. And when I looked into it, I think I read that I think it's 12 of the first 44 US presidents lost a parent. I think it was before they were 15. So, one of their parents died. And it's just fascinating how out of that kind of utter despair and grief can come this indomitable force to push people to become, amazing. And to push people to become like, the US president, basically. Because you go through something like that and you can just shatter, can't you? You can give up. But then you've got that percentage of people that are just somehow able to use that to grow. And that's the bit I'm so fascinated with.
And that's really the start of what you said there, self-discovery. But I think, I don't know, in that moment and in maybe the days afterwards, like we don't walk out, like we can have our moment and go like, why me, and get a bit upset, but we don't walk out and go to the self-help section of Amazon and start ordering books immediately, do we? So I'm interested to see how your self-discovery journey, like, can you remember any of the timelines of it and when it got maybe harder, maybe got easier, maybe when you realized that those words of the surgeon was like, you're okay, we can cure this. It's going to be cool. Do you remember some prevalent points of that self-discovery?
Yeah, I think what I remember is whilst I was I started treatment very quickly. I was very fortunate that I started it probably within weeks. And I remember very much, I think consciously saying to myself, right, game face on, let's do it. So kind of using battle mode, fight mode. I know a lot of cancer survivors hate the analogies of battles and fights. And I have had discussions with other cancer survivors about this. But for me, at that point, it was a battle. It was a battle. And I put, my game face on and I just went out, and I definitely was not doing any self-discovery at that early point, because it was all just focused into day to day. Cancer is like a full-time job. You go from one appointment to another appointment, to a scan, to another appointment, to blood test, to treatment. You have no time to self-discover. Like I would lie in bed and just watch rubbish TV, which I hadn't done for years. And I haven't really done since. But so I was not doing self-discovery at that point. And I think the self-discovery probably started after I had my chemo, and then I had my big surgery. And the rehab for the big surgery, I then started to go for daily walks. And it was on those daily walks that I started to really kind of tap into the podcast I was listening to. And talking about daily walks, exercise for me was so pivotal in my recovery as well. So pivotal in my mental recovery as well as my physical recovery, because it was just being able to take control of something. Because when you're going through something like that, everything is out of your control. And the one thing I could control was if I was able to exercise or not, and what I was able to do. So exercise, I've always loved exercise, but at that point, I say that exercise really did save my life.
That's quite amazing. I should have this function to rewind and replay what you just said there, Emma. Sometimes, but I'll sort of try and I'll probably screw it up, but I'll try and phrase it. A lot of the time, life takes things out of your control. The one thing that you could control was getting up and going for a walk, and that brought you probably insane, both physical and mental energy. That's incredible.
Yeah. And that is the phrase, control the controllables, isn't it?
Yeah.
But with exercise as well, we know that you get release of endorphins with it. So we know there's a physical response as well as just the mental response of being outside. When you're stuck in a hospital as well, or you're stuck in a chemo ward and there's no windows, and when you can go outside and you can hear the birds and, hear nature and feel the sun in your face, there's a real kind of like mental positiveness to it. Yeah.
Do you think you connected, you just said a couple of different things, the birds, the noises, the nature. Were you very conscious of that prior to being diagnosed? Was it heightened after? Did you start to appreciate these little things?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Nature. I've never been one for nature.
Really?
No.
I asked that question quite softly just to sort of feel it out of it, right?
Yeah, interesting though. I don't even think I've ever really fully reflected on that. But no, I would never have, at home, I live in like the suburbs of London, and I would have gone out for a run. I don't think I'd have recognized the fact that I was enjoying being in nature at all. Whereas that probably became the focus for me and the most positive. I'd look at the stream that I run along and I'd be like, oh, wow, look at the stream, look at the birds. Yeah, I really did take quite a lot of positive out of that. And I still do, actually. I kind of just thought it was me getting older, but maybe there is something a bit deeper to that.
I don't know. I think about it a lot. That's a selfish question, to be honest. That question, the answer to that was for me, and hopefully someone benefited from it as well. Because I kind of think, is it the trauma that I've been through? Is it, is it age? And then I often try to think back of what nature was when I was younger. And I don't know, maybe as we grow older, we appreciate it more and we need it more. And it's like you reach an age where you're allowed to like talk about it on podcasts and stuff and not sound weird or not feel weird.
It's so interesting. But just yesterday, like I said, I was in Edinburgh and we went for this big walk up to Arthur's Seat. Anyone might know who knows Edinburgh. And I didn't realize it was a fairly kind of arduous, I don't want to use the word hike, but walk up a craggy mountain. And I was so frustrated by the fact that I couldn't look around me because I had to concentrate on where my foot placement was. But all I wanted to do was look around me at the unbelievable views. Do you know what I mean? And again, I did reflect on that at the time, but I didn't relate it to my cancer. I just related it to kind of getting old and slow.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Is there a right? Is there a wrong? I have to ask you, you said that in the early parts of sort of recovery of your self-reflection, that's when you started listening to podcasts. Did you have a go-to podcast or couple of podcasts? Was there a secret one, or was there one that really did it for you?
I must be honest, though, that actually wasn't. I wish I had an answer for that. There was a few, you know, they were the kind of typical popular ones. So the kind of ones I listened to, like Elizabeth Day's How to Fail and Fern Cotton's Happy Place and Live Better, Feel More and Stephen Bartlett's one. You know, there was kind of like the popular ones that, because like I said, I didn't know the podcast world back then. So all I was doing was getting recommendations from friends. And then I was just finding these. And I've gone blank. What's the radio one? Desert Island Discs.
Yes, Desert Island Discs, like BBC.
Yes.
Something. Yeah.
Sorry, Desert Island Discs did become my favorite.
That?
Yeah, still runs.
I
love that because it was short. It had music in it.
Yeah.
That was, if I had to name one of my favorites at that point, it was Desert Island Discs. And I went through the whole back catalogue.
Really? Yeah, because they have some quite cool artists on there that adds the music and stuff, and there's a little bit of chit chat, and they're like 15 minutes long and something 10 to 20 minutes. Not so. Yeah, I get it. It's actually funny because I love cycling, and do I love Lance Armstrong? Yeah, I do. I think he's pretty, I think it's nuts. The whole story is nuts, and let's not make that the focal point. But his podcast, The Move, him and a few former pro cyclists, they talk about cycling. But it got to a point where I stopped listening to it because it was getting way too long and loads of commercials and stuff like this. And now the last few days, they've got short ones, like 15 minutes, talking about the race in Spain, the Vuelta. And it's absolutely brilliant because it's like this short dose, and it's just... Yeah, it's bang. Anyway, random chat. I see two things happening here. I see the first two stages of grief. I see a little bit of denial. I see a little bit of anger. Are you aware of the stages of grief? Did you, when you started to sort of discover yourself more and go on this journey of healing, did you start to see certain patterns or not?
Yeah, I think grief is something that people don't realize comes with a cancer diagnosis. And you do grieve, don't you? You grieve the life that you had pre-cancer, basically. It's funny you mention that, because I remember the oncologist saying that in one of our first appointments, and me thinking, why is he talking about grief? You know, it didn't really make sense. And now reflecting on that, yeah, you know, you have to go through the grieving process when you have had cancer. And it's something that's ongoing, really. So not one of the easy ones to deal with.
The other thing that I want to sort of touch on, and we do hear it a lot, is you mentioned the two words. One was battle and the other one was fight. And it implies anger. And through one of my favorite books, the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, obviously the opposite of anger is love, and love solves everything. But I don't know, to love having cancer is not something that many people have told me. We have this mindset of, you're going to have to fight this, and you're going to have to, literally every day is going to be a war. So what it puts it to is down to a little bit of interpretation of the word. Talk to us a little bit about, you went through, it is a battle. It's one battle after the other. It's a war. I've not been through it, but I listened to my mum, and when you were saying it, you know, she's knackered because it's like today blood test, tomorrow blood transfusion, the next day this, and I'm like, she's literally got a whole week of doctor's appointments and all of this. What is this fight? Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, well, for me, it definitely felt like a fight. And when I was talking to someone about it on my podcast recently, they said, and this person didn't agree with that terminology, because she was saying that she knows so many people that have lost that fight, and it's not their fault that they've lost that fight. So that's why she doesn't like using the fight and the warrior. analogies. However, for me, it was a bloody fight. But, again, her reply to that was maybe it was a fight for self-preservation, which I think actually makes a lot of sense, because it wasn't necessarily a fight against the cells. You know what I mean? In my head, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to kill these cancer cells. It was a fight to get to the end. And I've never once used the word I've won. I've never once said I've won.
Wow.
So and that would feel weird to say that as well, because I don't feel I have won. I've been through something fairly awful. I've managed to make positives from it, but it still had negative consequences on my life, and I definitely don't feel I've won. What's interesting, though, as well, is talking to my guests on my podcast. I think this fits in quite nicely. Hearing how so many of them feel that their lives are enriched following their traumatic experiences. And I find that really fascinating. I don't feel like my life has been enriched, but maybe it's because it's too early days, and maybe at some point I will have the same attitude. I'm not sure. Positive things have come out of it, but my life is not enriched following cancer.
There's a extremely fascinating book, which I think I've spoken about on the show before. I might have even mentioned it on your show, because I mention it all the time, and I've got like 3 copies in my bookshelf at the moment, that when people are struggling, they come into my office and I just give them one. Like, you need to read this. The book is called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
And
I've read that.
You've read it, you know it. Do you think, based on what you just said then, do you think that there are certain parts? I'm sure the last 3.5 years have felt like all the other years of your life put together, multiplied by 10 as far as length goes. They felt bloody long, and there was probably a lot of very long days. But do you think your feelings, maybe is your life enriched today? No, it's not. But maybe in 5 years, the body might be keeping the score for you, and might be telling you and knocking on the door in 5 years and say, actually, you're a lot better. And the reason why I'm asking that question is to try and understand, is the journey ongoing, is really the question.
Yeah, I think the journey is forever. I don't think you ever fully win. If you're going to use that analogy, I don't think you ever get to the end. I think when you've been through cancer, there's always a fear of recurrence. Talking to any cancer survivor, I've never met anyone that doesn't have a fear of recurrence. Thank God I have a good prognosis, and I have a low, if you look at the stats, the risk of recurrence is low. And I'm really fortunate to be able to say that. However, that does not take away the anxiety that comes with having had a cancer diagnosis. So, and I can't imagine ever really getting beyond that. I think I'll think about it less as the years go on, because it's still really in the forefront of my mind. I've been told that you think about it less, but I can't imagine I'll ever not think about it, because it's part of my journey now. It's kind of part of who I am.
Does that anxiety become hard? Does it become crippling on certain days?
Not for me, no. I wouldn't use the word crippling. I'd say it's there. It will flash into my mind maybe if I'm speaking to someone who has had a recurrence, or obviously whenever I go for I'm still on 6 monthly checkups. So if I go to the hospital, that's not a good day. Waiting for those scan results, not pleasant. But it does not become crippling. I'm quite able to move forward through it, luckily.
That's cool. Do you have low moments, Emma?
I'm probably pretty fortunate in the fact that I have normal low moments like everyone else on this planet. I think it'd be dishonest to say that I'm never sad or angry or frustrated. But I'm really fortunate that I've always been a positive person. And I am able to reframe a lot of those low moments. And I think I'm quite good at reframing negativity into positivity. You know, I hate it when people say things like, "Oh, that's a shame," because it's not a shame. Like,
I'm with you, mate. Yeah.
You know, like it's something that happened, but it happened. Now let's move on.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because part of it's like, are we numbing it? Are we back at the first part of the first stage of grief? Are we at denial again? Are we like, or are we just like, no, it's the way, like, it happened, and you went through the time of why me, you went through the time of, and then you went into how we sort of started the show of understanding where your focus and your energy and your resilience came from. And it's like that was in you. And so once you'd accepted this thing, you're able just to go like, let's get it.
Yeah.
I wanted to work in the Olympics. I wanted to work with top level elite athletes. Same mindset for me, what I see. And it sounds really quite messed up maybe to some people, but I've got cancer. I don't want to have cancer. I'm going to work and I'm going to focus and I'm put my energy, and I'm going to subconsciously deploy everything that's got me to where I am in my life, in my career, into this, and everything's going to be pretty okay. Kind of. I guess.
I think the hard bit listening to that is I was lucky as well, because some people can have that mindset and say, I don't want to have cancer, but actually the cancer can get them. You know what I mean? So again, I think there's a big bit of luck there in that I was fortunate, like I said, that my cancer does have a good prognosis. And that's not because I don't believe that's because of my mindset. I believe that's part of the luck.
Yeah. It's
you know, we can only control what we can control, but there is a lot of aspects that we unfortunately can't control.
What do you think? Do you ever look back, or I don't know if you look back, but you just look? Is it back? Is it into life? Is it whatever it is? Are there things that you go, wow, since 2020, since I was diagnosed, I've changed these things in my life, and now my life's better? Like, it's forced these changes.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast is a massive, you know, I said when I was 14, I knew I wanted to be a physio.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to be a Blue Peter presenter. Did you ever watch Blue Peter?
Oh, yes, of course.
So, you know, I remember very clearly being 14 and weighing up, do I want to be like a Blue Peter presenter and a newsreader or a physio? So I've always had that kind of desire to go into the broadcasting world, should we say. So yeah, the podcast for me is a massive positive of what has come out of the past 3 years, because I've able to put my energy into my second kind of desire in life. So there was physio and then there was broadcasting. And this is where I'm putting that energy into. And I love it, by the way. I absolutely love talking to interesting people like yourself, and getting deep and just analyzing how people think and then putting it out there for people's comments. I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Do you think maybe it's your therapy? Do you ever think about it like that?
Yeah, there must be a big element of that in terms of the processing, talking about it all. Yeah. I mean, I get to talk about it now, like once a week. Whereas you're right, I probably didn't talk about it at all before. So yeah, there is a bit of therapy. Did you find it therapy for you?
Mate, 100%. 100%. I mean, it sounds bad, and I don't, ignorant, confident, or arrogant. We sort of spoke about that earlier, but I mean, we're on show 800 and 44 now, right?
That's amazing.
It's amazing, mate. But I appreciate anyone that's been on the show, and I really genuinely do appreciate people that listen. But I started the show to talk to people, to ask questions, generally to people that I probably wouldn't, like, if I said, hey mate, can I call you at 8:00 on Tuesday and like ask you some really deep questions, like in these random emails to people on the other side of the world, like everyone would just go, fuck, who's this weirdo? But, you know, I called it a podcast and did exactly the same things, called them on, what was it then, on Skype, you know, and it was always a bad connection and VPNs and all this kind of stuff. But that's all I did to learn, you know, and the same reason why you've got your show, to share, because you're interested and you share. But it's, I don't know, it's therapy. You know, I've asked you questions today to help myself. They've been purely, but I don't think I'm such a selfish prick that they're just for me. I think a lot of people that hopefully listen, or the 10 people that listen, I think like might have similar questions. You know, I've been going through with my mum's journey for the last 18 months. And, you know, I've asked you questions today because of her. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that are listening that have been touched in some way or impacted in some way by cancer. So I think we're doing what we're doing as podcast hosts for, not just because we wanted to be on Blue Peter, it's super nice as well, but you know, we want to do what Blue Peter did, which is help people, you know. But
I've always said that my one aim with my podcast was to inspire people. I wanted people listening to hear the stories of these people that have been through these awful, awful scenarios and come out stronger. Because if you're going through something difficult and you can hear that, how can that not inspire you?
Do you think you're more focused and more driven in this? And I'll make it dramatic. You've been given a second chance. It could have gone either way, right? And that's the thing with illness, with trauma. Are you more driven than you were?
Yes, I probably am, actually. I mean, let's not get this wrong, I was always driven. But now, if I want to do something, I will do it.
I'm going to do it.
You know? But, you know, even down to the little things, like if I want to go on a holiday, for instance, and my husband will say, no, don't be ridiculous. Like, we don't need to do that. We've done something else. I'll say, no, you know, I'm going to do it, because actually we don't know what is around the corner. We don't know where we're going to be tomorrow. And so, yes, the way I reflect on it big time is, you know, I really do try to live each day like it is your last, within boundaries, obviously, because you can't be crazy.
I mean, I was going to ask that question. What is the limit? How does your rational mind come in and go, no, we can't go on 12 holidays this year, Emma? You want to, and we know, you know, it's not forever, but
yeah. I mean, honestly, the only thing that stops me is budget. If it wasn't for budget, I would just be traveling all the time around my, you know, with my kids. And I love traveling. I love exploring. It really, really does like fill my heart when I go to new places and just discover new places. So yeah, if I had an unlimited budget, I'd travel all the time.
Guys, we need to really, really support Emma's podcast. When life gives you lemons, go and listen to it. Tell all your friends about it. Let's put her on the TV so we can get her an unlimited budget so she can live the life that she dreams.
Exactly. I need my private jet.
And then... Oh, geez, you don't want much, do you? I mean, economy everywhere, mate.
I want a yacht.
Yeah, exactly. Podcast from a yacht. You could like fly guests in on the podcast helicopter and when Rogan starts doing that, we'll start doing that as well, mate. Yeah.
Well, the first time we met, I remember saying to you, like, one day I'll be able to afford to come out to Dubai to interview you. Yeah. So there you go. When I've made that money, we'll do a face-to-face in Dubai.
It'll be cool. Emma, it's an incredible story, and the way that you share it through your podcast it's absolutely what you want it to be. It's giving, it's your learning journey, and it is inspiring for others. And what you've sort of shared with me and my 5 guests, or my 5 listeners today, is honestly, mate, I really, really appreciate it. And it's inspiring. So I appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Marcus. Love what you do as well. Love your podcast. Thank you.